So as you know, the first section of the Groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals did really two things for us. First, by refining the way we think about morality, we've started with these common sense intuitions, and we've got ourselves asking better, more precise questions about morality. So in this second section, then, we're finally really ready to get the heart of Kant's theory. We're thinking about morality in a better, more precise, more philosophical way, and that's going to allow Kant to finally really lay out what he has to say. But second of all, of course, those intuitions in the first section, Kant was not teaching you. He was not showing you right from wrong. He was really just asking you to think about your intuitions and comparing. And so we've been able to think about some examples and just notice that we come to roughly the same intuitive sense of right and wrong here. But because of that, in the second section, Kant is going to start the first several paragraphs of the second section. He's just going to have to remind you, just because we're talking about examples does not mean you should get morality from examples. Remember, you cannot get morality from experience. What we're doing is actually applying morality to our experiences. And so, there's even this paragraph early on in the second section where he says, even the Holy One of the Gospels, in other words, even Jesus. He said, if Jesus were here, still, you don't get morality from experience. Well, whatever Jesus is doing, it must be the right thing. Rather, he says, in order to recognize that that really is who he says he is, you'd have to compare what he's doing with your knowledge of morality. In other words, someone shows up and claims to be Jesus. Well, don't do whatever he's doing, assuming it's the right thing. Make sure he's doing the right thing. And if he's not, well, then he's probably also lying about being Jesus. But at any rate, after spending some time, again, stressing, you can't get morality from experience. We're not actually drawing these lessons from examples. Kant's argument is finally going to start right around the 12th paragraph of the second section, where he says, everything in nature works according to laws. So this should make sense, right? I mean, it's not just humans, it's not just animals. I mean, think about, rocks and trees and things. There are the laws of physics. There are laws of nature governing the way things behave. And likewise, animals are governed by their own kinds of laws, right? We call that instinct. An animal's instincts drive it to act a certain way. Everything in nature works according to laws. We, as rational beings, of course, do get a special note here. Rational beings alone, Kant writes, have the faculty of acting according to the conception of laws. So conception here, the idea, right? I act not just according to the laws of physics, certainly laws of nature, but I also am able to act according to laws in my head, ideas, my conception of laws. And furthermore, Kant says, the conceptions of laws, that is, according to principles, in other words, i.e., they have a will. So what is a principle? A principle is then just a law in your head, right? An idea of a law. If you have a principle of always putting your own interests above those of others, notice I said always, right? It's a principle, it's a law, it's a general rule. It's not just a decision I'm making right here, right now. Likewise, if you have principles about being honest with people or always helping out people who need something, again, these are general rules, right? We work according to general rules, and that's what it means to have a will. And furthermore, Kant says, since the deduction of actions from principles requires reason, the will is nothing but practical reason. What the will is a part of your reason. It's a faculty of reason that takes general rules, applies them to specific situations in order to deduce or derive specific choices or actions. So, what I want you to think about here, right? Because Kant will go on to say, if reason infallibly determines the will, then the actions of such a being, blah, blah, blah. What's he talking about here? Well, I want you to think about it like this. Reason is a universal capacity. It is, as we've said about logic, it is formal and applies always and everywhere in the same way, right? So think about the way math works, think about the way logic works. If something is valid according to reason, it's valid for everybody, right? It applies everywhere, always. By contrast, desires, your desires, on the very next page in a footnote, Kant will call them interests, right? Your desires are always valid for you, but only for you. If you want something, then you really do want it, right? I can't tell you otherwise. But just because you want something, just because you find it desirable, does not mean that I will find it desirable. It does not mean that I should find it desirable, right? At the most, recognizing that you are someone different than me and assuming you're telling me the truth, I can recognize that you find it desirable. But you wanting something is a reason for you to get it, but it's not necessarily a reason for anybody else to get it. So, what this means is that if reason, this universal capacity, were to directly determine actions, then a being whose actions were determined by reason would always do what everyone ought to do. In other words, you would be a morally perfect being. And if we were to imagine a morally perfect being, an angel, a saint, a god, whomever, we would be able to predict that being's actions the exact way that, say, the laws of physics can predict that what goes up must come down, right? If this is what ought to be done, then this is what a morally perfect being will do. We just know that up front. Likewise, if desire directly determines action, that's how animals work, right? That's how their instincts work. An animal is instinctually driven by its very strongest desire of the moment. It just does whatever it most wants to do within, of course, its capabilities. So if your actions were automatically determined by either of these, you would have no will. It wouldn't be right to say you decide to do anything. A morally perfect being doesn't decide to do the right thing. It just automatically does the right thing. Nor does an animal decide to do what it wants to do. It just automatically does whatever its strongest desire is to do. On the other hand, will, this faculty of practical reason, what it does is at every given time, it takes these general rules about what you ought to do. It takes your general desires about what you want, and it applies to a specific situation and has to determine what you're going to do. At any given time, you could do what you want to do, or you could do what you ought to do. And when these two are the same thing, fantastic. You do the right thing and you enjoy doing it. But anytime these two things diverge, you have a decision to make. And because you are a human being, you are capable of making those decisions. You have a will, and this means you always then have the ability to choose the right thing or to choose the wrong thing. So, as Kant writes, if reason infallibly determines the will, then the actions of such a being which are recognized as objectively necessary, the things that everyone ought to do, are subjectively necessary also, what it must do. If reason all by itself does not sufficiently determine the will, again, if reason does not automatically determine your will and your choices, if your will is also subject to subjective conditions, particular impulses, right, which you want to do, which do not always coincide with the objective conditions. In other words, if what you want is not always the same thing as what you ought to do. If, in a word, the will does not in itself completely accord with reason, which is actually the case with human beings, then the actions which are objectively recognized as necessary are subjectively contingent. In other words, objectively necessary, right? Necessary for everyone, what everyone ought to do. Again, think back to our language of duty, what everyone must do. That's why he talks about objective necessity. Your duty is what you have to do, even if you don't do it. So, the actions that are objectively necessary, the things you must do, are subjectively contingent. You might do what you have to do, or you might choose not to do what you're supposed to do, what you have to do. You might shirk your duty. And so, this means that because reason does not directly determine my actions, it will instead give the will rules or commands. In other words, if we want to know what we are supposed to do, right? I want to know this supreme principle of morality. This has been the project all along, right? Let's figure out what morality says to do, what the difference between right and wrong is. This is going to be Kant's way to start to figure that out. What we can do, he'll say, is just listen to what reason tells the will to do. And so first, you'll have to notice that the way reason will speak to the will is in the form of a command. Now, why a command? Because again, remember, reason does not automatically determine my actions. Reason does not tell me what I'm going to do. Reason tells me what I ought to do. It's going to give me commands, do the right thing. And so, here will be how Kant opens up reason to listen, to hear, to see what it is that the right thing to do is. He's going to say what we need to do is pay attention to that form that the command takes. Now, over the next several paragraphs, what Kant is going to do is take a little detour through grammar. Why grammar? Well, again, we're just going to look at the form that reason takes when it speaks to the will, when it gives me those commands. And the form of a command, that's an imperative. I want you to think back to 7th grade language arts, right? You learned a couple of different kinds of sentences. You've got declarative sentences, right? What you might call statements. They tend to end in a period. I am going to the mall. It is raining outside. Today is Tuesday. You also have interrogatives. They tend to end in question marks, or they tend to be questions, right? What are you going to do today? What is the day of the week? What are we having for dinner tonight? Why do you have a beard? And then, of course, there are imperatives, commands. Go to the mall, close the door, wash your hands, chew with your mouth closed. And so all of these forms of sentences are the forms that your thought, your content has to take as you speak to someone, right? So if reason is going to tell me what to do, it is going to speak to me in the form of an imperative. Now, furthermore, as Kant notes, all imperatives, all sentences, can be either what he calls hypothetical or categorical. hypothetical, right? Conditional, we might say. A hypothetical you're going to recognize because it takes the form if, then. If it rains today, then I am going to go to the mall. That is a conditional statement, right? Or as we might say, a hypothetical statement. It is a hypothetical declarative. I have told you what I'm going to do, but not necessarily what I'm going to do, only if it rains. If it rains today, I'm going to go to the mall. If it is sunny, then I'm going to go to the arboretum, right? These are two different conditions. Depending on which one happens, here's what I'm saying I'm going to do. Likewise, I can ask you a conditional or hypothetical interrogative, right? If aliens invade the Earth tomorrow, are you still going to do your math homework? If we go to war with Canada, then will you enlist? If it rains tomorrow, then do you want to stay home and play Monopoly? Finally, I can give you hypothetical imperatives, right? If you want to have cereal for breakfast tomorrow, then you must buy some milk on your way home from work tonight. If aliens invade the Earth tomorrow, then do not subscribe to my YouTube channel. If your nose itches in public, then find a discreet way to scratch it. In each of these cases, notice I am telling you to do something, but not automatically, not necessarily, right? I'm not telling you to itch your nose. I'm not telling you not to subscribe. I'm not telling you to stay home, right? I'm just telling you if this thing happens, or if you want to do this thing, then. Now, if that condition never arises, then I haven't told you to do anything. Furthermore, if you want cereal for breakfast tomorrow, then you have to buy some milk. Well, okay, you might understand that that's the case, but you might also say, you know what, it's just too much effort. I just can't stomach the idea of the grocery store after a full day of work. Forget about it, right? I don't want cereal anymore. So in each of these cases, when I give you a hypothetical command, it does not automatically or necessarily imply. It just applies under specific conditions. Now, can morality take the form of a hypothetical imperative? And hopefully you already see why Kant is going to say no, right? Morality, the command to do the right thing, that can't be conditional, because who is it who must do the right thing? Is it just you? Is it just me? Is it just my neighbor Fred? No, it's everybody. When must you do the right thing? Is it just on Tuesdays? Is it just at 3 o'clock? Is it just when it's raining outside? No, you must always do the right thing. You and everybody else must always, in all circumstances, in all conditions, do the right thing. Is there ever a right time to do the wrong thing? No, it wouldn't be right then, would it? And so, morality does not command conditionally, it commands unconditionally. Morality does not command hypothetically, it commands categorically. And so, what Kant is going to call the categorical imperative is just the form that commands of morality take. To put it very, very simply, we might just say morality says, do the right thing. Notice, I haven't given a specific person, everybody. I haven't given a specific time or a specific condition or something specific you're trying to achieve, right? If you want people to like you, then you should do the right thing. If you think you might get punished for doing the wrong thing, then you should do the right thing. If people are watching, then you must do the right thing. All of those would be hypothetical conditions. None of them are real, true morality. Morality says you must always do the right thing, even when nobody's looking, even when people will hate you for it. It's just the right thing to do. And so, you thought we had set everything up properly and philosophically in section 1. We're still shifting things around a little bit. If we want to know the difference between right and wrong, if we are looking for that supreme principle of morality, the way we can figure that out, Kant now shows us, is to look at what he's calling the categorical imperative. What is this imperative, this command that reason gives the will always, at all times, for all people? What is the thing that everyone must always do? That's how, believe it or not, we can figure out what the right thing to do is. That's how we can see the difference between right and wrong. Because, as Kant will say, if I think about a hypothetical imperative, a conditional command, right? I don't know in advance what it's going to say. I don't know until you give me the specific conditions. If I tell you if blank, then you must blank, well, you don't know. I could fill those 2 blanks in with any number of things, right? For the exact same command, eat a sandwich, I could come up with a million different conditions, right? If you're hungry, eat a sandwich. If you are thirsty, eat a sandwich. If aliens invade the earth, then eat a sandwich. If we go to war with Canada, then eat a sandwich. Likewise, for the exact same condition, I can give you a million different commands, right? If it rains tomorrow, then go to the mall. If it rains tomorrow, then stay home. If it rains tomorrow, then eat a sandwich. And there are unlimited conditions and unlimited commands for each condition. There are an infinite number, at least, of possible hypothetical imperatives. By contrast, Kant says, when I think about a categorical imperative, I know in advance already what it must say. Well, that makes one of us, right? How does Kant already know? Well, let's put it this way. The categorical imperative always applies to all people in exactly the same way. So how many possible categorical imperatives could there be? Well, think about it this way. If there were even 2 categorical imperatives, what would it mean for there to be 2 different rules? Well, in order for them to be different rules, they would have to either apply to different people, not apply to everybody, or they would have to apply to the same person in different circumstances. They wouldn't always apply. Or they would have to tell the same person in the same circumstance to do 2 different things. None of those is possible for morality. You and everybody else must always do the right thing. In other words, there can only be one categorical imperative possible. And as I've already said, it basically just says, do the right thing. Now that is too abstract and unhelpful. And so what Kant is going to do over the rest of this section is to give us reformulations of the categorical imperative. Now, when I say reformulations, I simply mean restatements, different ways of saying the exact same one thing. Which is why, over the next several pages, as Kant reformulates his categorical imperative, you'll see he's going to go into a series of 4 examples. And they're going to be the exact same 4 examples both times. And he's going to show you that we get the exact same answer in each example every time. Because if we got a different answer, it wouldn't be the same imperative. So Kant is going to stress here, he's simply giving you reformulations, different ways of saying the exact same one thing, do the right thing. Now, depending on how closely you want to read this section, you can find as many as probably 9 different formulations of the categorical imperative. We're going to focus on 3 as we go through this section together. but that's going to be our way of coming to understand the right thing to do. It's going to be our way of understanding morality. And again, for Kant, this is just ways of making explicit the way we all have to think about the right thing to do, have to think about right and wrong. This is just the conditions of us making sense to each other when we talk about morality. So what we'll do is take a look at this series of 3 major formulations of the categorical imperative in order to really figure out the supreme principle of morality.